Hello, everyone. Sandra here, and it's time for my November 2024 month wrap up. It's a little earlier than maybe I want to do it by a couple days, but in a couple days it's Thanksgiving, and that's not a great time to be trying to do this either. So we're just going to go ahead and do it now. So I've just been reviewing my stuff for the month, and I was tired a lot. That's one of the things that stands out. I had a lot of sleep challenges. There's also just been so I only streamed once. I was just double checking that, and I streamed Guild Wars 1 once for like an hour and a half on the 8th. And I've been kind of reflecting a little bit, just leading up to knowing that I was getting towards the end of the month, I'm going to want to do one of these. I didn't feel like I streamed a whole lot this month. Why was that? And just thinking about what other things was I doing. And some of the things that come to mind, I was definitely playing a lot of Guild Wars 2, which generally, from what I've been seeing, people aren't really interested in watching me do like casual Guild Wars 2 playing. And streaming has enough overhead that I don't necessarily want to just have to do it. But maybe that's something that I should be just doing more Guild Wars 2 streams anyway. Guild Wars 1 is definitely more popular on my channel for whatever that's worth. I do appreciate everybody who enjoys watching the Guild Wars 1. I've been having this kind of bubbling, growing desire to finally stream that playthrough of Middle-earth: Shadows of War that I was wanting to do for a while. I have such a mixed relationship with Guild Wars 2. On the one hand, there is, at its core, I feel like the design has so many terrible decisions, but that they've built up enough edifice around it that like there's a lot of fun there too. And so sometimes I'm playing it, I'm like, because like one of the things I did is I finally finished the Seasons of the Dragons, or however the plurals on that actually work, meta achievement that unlocks the Prismatic Champions Regalia. Looking down my notes for the month, and so I finally got that, and it's like, oh yeah, I unlocked this legendary, and oh, I wish every trinket I had was legendary, because this makes buildcraft like exponentially better. And I don't use the word exponentially lightly. I know what it means. Like exponentially is like you're adding like that's a fast curve that I'm probably not drawing the correct way on the screen, but it goes up very quickly. And that really changed the color balance of my camera. Holy crap, that is wild. Okay, well, technical oddities aside, like that, it changes things dramatically. Each legendary you get makes the buildcraft a more enjoyable process, because the buildcraft in Guild Wars 2 is so equipment based. It is like it impedes it so much. Like Guild Wars 1, you can experiment with builds however you want, and it's like the irony here. The irony is that I recall in some of the transitional process going from Guild Wars 1 to Guild Wars 2, some of the things that was being said at the time by the developers who were working on the game at the time. I know there's been some shift and change, particularly in some leadership roles. Some have left and come back. But I remember them saying that one of the motivations particularly for changing the skill bar, is that they wanted to prevent players from being able to make builds that just didn't work, right? From actively bad builds. But the problem is their equipment system, the effectiveness of your build is so reliant on your equipment that your skills, like, they matter, but your equipment matters a heck of a lot. And because it's so easy to just end up with a hodgepodge of equipment, you're right back in this position of you're net decking your equipment build, because it's such a huge investment to set up your equipment compared to Guild Wars 1. Like Guild Wars 1, equipment's not equipment's important in Guild Wars 1, but in Guild Wars 2, it is several orders of magnitude more important to the function of your build, or at least a couple orders of magnitude more important in terms of determining your effectiveness. There's just like the game, in my opinion, like once you start biting into that legendary part of the core, or like the effects of legendaries on your ability to like buildcraft and change what you're doing and improve tweak the effectiveness of your builds. So that way you can be like, oh, this build is relying heavily on conditions. I should go into Condi damage, but I have power-oriented equipment. It's like, and the trinket slot. Anyway, I'm rambling, but like, there's something there where I feel like the build system is incredibly impeded by the significance of equipment. in terms of your actual effectiveness with your builds. And it just feels so ironic that they're like, we want to make it so that way players can't like make builds that are just completely dysfunctional with this extremely static skill bar, or like pre-laid out skill bar, right, as compared to Guild Wars 1. And then they go and they make it like terrible in another way. Like, but that's game design. That is absolutely game design, where you're like, oh, I'm going to do X thing because I think it'll solve this problem. And it does solve that problem, but it introduces a different problem, which reintroduces the original issue you're trying to solve in the first place. Like, I have run into this. This is why I've restarted so many RPG Maker MV projects. Speaking of which, that's something else that I've been doing as I've been working on my RPG Maker MV project. I'm realizing that this is a hard segue pivot, but whatever. I need to get better at pivoting. Because one of the things that I've realized that I run into as a problem when working on this game is I will get fixated on a design problem that I'm trying to solve. Like, okay, I'm making a piece of equipment and I am borrowing a Guild Wars 2 concept for this particular game that I'm working on. Who knows if I'll keep working on it, but for now I'm liking the direction that I'm moving with things because I'm like freeing myself up from, I'll get into that in a moment. I want to finish on this point. So you have your weapons in this RPG Maker MV game, and I am borrowing the concept of like, oh, equipment has skills like Guild Wars 2 has, because I think that makes for an interesting angle for doing build craft, and it means that your equipment's not just a numbers game, right? Which is part of the problem that I have with equipment in Guild Wars 2. But anyway, so it's not just a numbers game. It's not just about finding, oh, this has the highest damage value on it that makes your skills better, but it adds an area of customization. But rather than having everybody being able to wield every weapon like I've done in the past, which is a terrible idea, don't do that. Like, you can do that if you do Guild Wars 2 style, where each weapon, like the spear, is implemented differently for each character class, because the spear, every character class, every profession in Guild Wars 2 can wield the spear, but they wield it in wildly different ways. That's fine, but if it's static skills attached to them, which is what happens with RPG Maker MV, because, I mean, you could probably set up a plugin to do it differently, but then it's going to be so unwieldy, I don't even want to think about it. So, like, it's really easy to make RPG Maker MV extremely unwieldy to work with based on plugins, because you can't really customize the user interface for editing things worth anything. Like, anyway, that's not worth getting into. So, like, it's like, oh, I'm being very specific about who gets what, so that should solve some of the everything becomes a muddied mess problem. Anyway, and I'm being very careful about how many skills. But my broader point is that I get hyperfixated on, okay, I want a skill here, but I want to try to make sure it has a purpose and blah, blah, blah. So I get hyperfixated on, I need to try to figure out skills here, and then I get stuck on that, and then I, like, until I solve that, I'm not moving on with any other parts of the design. So I need to learn how to pivot away from, I'm not figuring this out right now, let's just go work on something else. I need to get better about that, but I'm like, I want to keep working on this spot while I'm thinking about what my goals are here. Maybe I just need a better organizational method for keeping track of what I'm trying to do. I don't know why it took me, and sometimes talking about problems helps you solve the problems, which is why there's this concept of rubber ducking, where if you could have just talked to a rubber duck, you go up to a colleague to explain the problem to them. Hello, colleagues. Apparently, you're my colleagues now. You go up to a colleague and explain the problem to them. In the process, you figure out the solution of the problem, and you could have just been talking to a rubber duck. Which, I mean, in some regards, prayer is really helpful for that, because it's like, oh, I'm just talking to God. He's listening, but as I'm praying and explaining what's going on, it's like, oh, it's the same sort of effect, which is some sort of weird tertiary benefit to prayer, I suppose. But anyway, so I've been kind of focused on working on that. There's also just been a lot of video content that I've been wanting to watch that's happening this month, or has happened this month. Desert Bus went on, I don't know, when was this? Early on in the month. I'm sure I could locate it, but it doesn't really matter. It was in the first half of the month. So there's a lot of like, oh, I'm watching parts of Desert Bus. There was this whole U.S. presidential election that, frankly, as far as my brain is concerned, the results still feel surreal and impossible to it. But I'm not going to get into politics too deeply, because I could go into that for a very long time and probably be wrong about some percentage of what I think. The world is extremely complicated, and we want things to be simple. And this is something that I've been thinking about lately, in general, as like just a problem that I think everyone struggles with, is we have an idea that we get into our head of how something will be, and we imagine it, we envision it, but we we do so simply and fail to do so complexly. And so if we ever achieve that thing that we imagined, the end result is that we don't feel like we achieved what we imagined because we get the complex reality, which often has a mixture of good things and bad things and all sorts of other stuff like mixed into it, where it is complicated and nuanced, and it's not the simple thing that we were imagining. And because it wasn't the thing that we're imagining, and often this is a problem that we have with our media, is that we present the thing that we were imagining, not the reality. So like a good example is our media often abstracts away travel time, right? So like I was thinking about travel vlogs. Graham Stark of Loading Ready Run has done some really excellent travel vlogs that I've really enjoyed watching, and I do recommend them because I think they're well done. But they show the highlights of travel. They give the tasting notes of travel, which are quite enjoyable. But then you actually sit there and do travel, and you're like, I am chewing on this friggin' airplane, and it is like I am sitting here for hours having to try to figure out how to fill the time while I'm waiting to be moved. And like, don't get me wrong, airplanes substantially better than having to wait by a week-long or month-long boat trip or whatever. But like, it still is not the fun part of travel, right? I mean, maybe you have some really cool clouds or something that you're looking at, but like, how long? Most people are not going to be able to be entertained by looking at clouds for 8 hours or whatever for some of those like international flights and things like that. So depending upon how far international means, like I'm thinking of like flying from the United States to Europe. Now it's going to be a hefty trip, particularly from the West Coast where I'm at. So anyway, my point on all of this is that like you get the tasting notes, the bits that are really nice about travel, and you're not having to deal with all of the complications that maybe they like come up, but you already are moved right on to the solution and things like that. And I feel like our imaginations, that is the version of things that we picture in our heads. And so then when we hit the reality, it's not that, right? And then we're disappointed because it's not the complexity of reality is disappointing to us because it is not the simple thing. And then we're like, well, then I don't want the thing that I thought I wanted because it's not the thing that I thought I wanted, right? So I think we can run into that a lot. And I've been trying to be active on Blue Sky. There should be, if I've set it up correctly, a link to that down in the description to my Blue Sky. And I've been trying to, so I had a thread recently that I was posting there where I was kind of musing about stuff related to that sort of concept. Not that specific one, but I've been trying to be active on Blue Sky, and it's been challenging to figure out what I want to be doing with the space because I don't want to, and I've been seeing the sentiment a lot, I don't want it to be Twitter, and I feel like Twitter had an sort of antagonistic air where you were rewarded for dunking on stuff, and people are very much so trying to make sure Blue Sky doesn't turn into that, and I think that's good. I think that's a good impulse. A lot of don't feed the trolls rhetoric that I've been seeing popping up, and I think that's a really good sentiment. But it's definitely been like a process of trying to, man, I feel like this whole thing is some weird dream where I'm like transitioning from one thing to another, and it's like, what is the overarching theme of what's going on here? But that's how life goes, and how my brain works. But the process of like figuring out and like detoxing from that mindset, and it's actually connected to I have an idea for the next article that I'm going to write, talking about morality using Magic Color Pie to kind of examine the lenses, but in a deeper, more thorough level than I've thought about it before, and in particular how it impacts me. So I've been thinking about that a lot, and I don't know. There's a lot that I'm trying to process. I'm not sure where I'm going to pivot off from there. So let's just go back to the game thing because I stuck a pin in something. So some of the things that I've been trying to do with it is figure out what things keep me or like cause me to lose motivation, and so what can I do to intentionally engage in keeping motivation. And I have to embrace the fact that I'm a pantser, not a plotter. As a creative, like I kind of just need to muddy about until something comes out of it. And I need to find the little things that amuse me. So there's going to be a lot of pun names and stuff. Things that just, they make me happy and are amused. But yeah, I've just been trying to figure out how to avoid the traps that I run into, because I really like stuff that's been well plotted. Like, I love the intentionality in something like FromSoft game, like Elden Ring or the Dark Souls trilogy, where there's clearly been a lot of careful thought to the world building and lore that's shaping how the game is designed. Now, there's a lot of gameness to those games, but the importance of the lore and the world building goes into a lot of the art and overall expression. Now, I don't think From Software is great at making, like, they make places that are levels to play, not places that are places to be. And that's just it hampers some of the illusion. Now, they try to hide that with broken bridges and other things, but, like, let's be real. You go to Raya Lucaria, you do not want to have to take the friggin' weird water wheel thingy to get up to your classroom. Nobody wants to do that. And there's clearly broken staircases that maybe at one point in time you didn't have to do that to get from the lower half to the upper half of this place. But, like, as a gameplay thing, it's great. As a place to live, it's awful. And nobody would actually actively make something like that, right? Like, that's not how an architect would actually work. But they have this really good sense of intentionality with the lore and how everything's put together that I really enjoy and admire, but I cannot, like, if that happens, I'm not sure how that comes out with the way that I work, and maybe I'm just envisioning the process incorrectly, but, like, I have to have a degree of chaotic, goofy energy about what I'm doing, or I'm not going to be able to keep up my motivation. And the things that hamper my motivation is when I'm trying to worry too much about the lore or consistency or things. I need to just focus on, like, building a base foundation, and then I can tweak stuff afterwards. And I've just, like, run into those hyperfixation problems that I was discussing, where I'm like, oh, I need to figure out the skill before I can do anything else in this game. It's like, no, I don't. But I run into those sorts of problems because I get into my head, and it's less a problem with a skill and more with lore, where it's like, oh, I need to figure out all of this lore so that way when I make stuff, it's like, no, you make stuff and then you can worry about slapping the lore on top. And I just need to bottom up a lot more with my design. I need to start with, like, the mechanics and whatever. It's a weird mess. I'm not gonna worry about it. So other things that I've also been watching, to return to that topic, is Bingo Brawlers. I've been really enjoying that. To briefly explain what Bingo Brawlers is. To explain what Bingo Brawlers is, because I don't know that I can do it super briefly, it is this concept of, it's an esports format where you take a single-player game, or a game that you're playing in single-player, where players have a 5x5 grid, typically. You could probably do different size grids, but usually what I've seen and what Bingo Brawlers does is a 5x5 grid. It's a bingo board, but there's different objectives. So each player is playing to the same board, and they're playing what's called lockout, which is where when one player gets a square, the other player cannot get that square. So you either win by getting a bingo, or by blocking all of your opponent's possible routes to get a bingo line, and then getting the most squares. So that's a majority win. And so they're playing at the same time. They're racing for different objectives, making different decisions about what to do. It's put on by Captain Domo, but you can find the Bingo Brawlers has its own YouTube channel separate from his stuff. But I've been really enjoying that. So I've been watching season 4 of Bingo Brawlers. They're playing Elden Ring for it, and this season 4 is about the DLC. And there's a lot of interesting strategy in terms of, like, oh, the players do not know what the other person is doing, except the only method of communication between them is what square did you last click on the bingo board and when did you click it. So there's information that can be hidden there, that can be presented there. So it's really interesting from a strategic standpoint in terms of, like, how they're interacting and how the players are developing their skills at doing it as it goes on. So I've been really enjoying watching that as well, but that's been soaking up a lot of my time as well as been watching that. Any other things that are worth mentioning? Yes. You'll notice the magic card piles there are a little bit different than things have been, maybe. I don't remember exactly what they looked like in the last video. I didn't really watch last month, but I usually don't. But I undertook the big project of putting all of the cards that I wanted to put in my boxes away. Those cards are a combination of stuff left over that I'd pulled out for building a deck. I want to build more decks. I love building Magic decks, but I want more sleeves for that. I arguably need more places to put them. And the Magic Foundations pre-release, which is the one event that I've gone to this month. So I had fun with it. I did have fun with it, but for budgetary reasons, I needed to not do any more Magic events this month. Not enough standard events were firing, so that's just how it goes. Anything else that I'm wanting to mention? I learned that apparently the supply of black plastics has potentially has to some varying degrees gotten infiltrated by stuff laden with toxic like catching on fire, I want to say anti-inflammatory, but that's not inflammable. Flame retardants, that's what it is. Flame retardant chemicals that then can, from electronics that were supposed to be kept in a separate stream but weren't and ended up in the same supply, and maybe some of the black plastic utensils, or at least according to the study, that we make food with might leach out these carcinogenic chemicals, some of which are banned now. So that's not great. Anything else that I want to mention? Yeah, I don't know. I've been having this weird, I don't know. Is it worth talking about? This weird thing where, like, when I wake up, sometimes I have blue dots in my vision. I don't know what that's about. So I've been trying to figure it out. My doctor thinks it's likely not a big issue because it goes away pretty quickly after getting up, but I want to investigate that a little bit more. Is that worth mentioning? I have mentioned it regardless. I don't know. I feel like it's been kind of an odd month. I made a plan for myself, part of a budgetary plan too, that I would subscribe to Crunchyroll again in December, and I am deeply looking forward to that. I feel like there's been a lot of me trying to find stuff to fill the spot of there's a lot of stuff that I enjoy on YouTube, but really I want something that's like a produced storyline, and I've been really missing that. So I'm looking forward to that again. Yeah, I feel like that's kind of the big things that I want to mention. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if you watching this would be interested in more stream VODs of me casually playing Guild Wars 2, whatever random thing that it, like, part of what's tricky is a lot of the like cleanup of various things that I'm doing like requires me to be looking up things in the wiki, and that feels kind of clunky, but it's like totally doable while streaming. So if that's something that you'd be interested in stream wise, let me know, and maybe there'll just be a lot more Guild Wars 2 streams. I don't know. I have very like mixed feelings about streaming that game, just in the sense that is the overhead worth it? It kind of comes down to like, why do I stream, right? And I certainly appreciate lurkers, but for me, part of the appeal of streaming is having somebody to interact with. And I don't feel like I've gotten a whole lot of that with Guild Wars 2. Okay, I feel like I'm supposed to have more to say, but I feel like I've kind of also just like run through all the things that I had to say. So I'm just staring down at my list of things, and I'm like, I don't know, it's been kind of a simple month in many regards. So I'm gonna wrap up here, I guess. Hope to see you in December. Hope you're doing well. Maybe the article that I mentioned that I have been thinking a lot about but haven't started writing yet will come out in December. That would be pretty great. I would like that. Okay. Bye.